Thanks, Amy. Well, we're just going to give everybody a chance to log in first. And while we're doing that, Nathan, do you have any pets?
I don't.
No
No,
fur babies?
no fur babies for me. I just have just an awesome uncle. I have nieces and nephews that um, I love. I can load up with sugar and then send them home, and that's like the best.
I love it. I
Yeah,
love it.
You stole my line, Nathan. That's before we had my son. That was our plan, was just to spoil everybody
yeah.
else's kids.
That's
And
the way to do
then
it,
Yep.
I
and then
love
hand them
it.
back.
Oh my goodness. Well, I think we have quite a bit of people coming in still, but we have a lot to talk about. So why don't we get started? What do y'all think?
Yeah,
Okay,
I
let's do
agree.
this. So, welcome to the SIP, a space where conversations fuel connection, collaboration drives innovation, and industry leaders come together to tackle challenges. Just like catching up over coffee, the SIP is about meaningful discussions that move us forward. Thank you for taking time out of your day to join us. I'm Mimi Paxson, the SVP of Partnerships here at TMC, sitting in for Jody this week. She is on vacation, and between us, I think putting
Much
off
deserved.
the Act Tech Summit is what did her in. 2 days of first of its kind event for this industry, and Jody ran point for all of it. She definitely earned this week off. So today's show is sponsored by Xactus, who fittingly was also the title sponsor for the AgTech Summit. And it's a perfect fit for today's conversation because we're talking about what happened in Dallas, what it means for verification and data, and what our guests are bringing back to their own shop. Joining me is Tom Galucci, EVP of Strategic Sales at Xactus, and no stranger to TMC. Tom, welcome to the SIP.
Thank you, Mimi. Great to be here.
And Nathan Seifer, SVP of Mortgage at GreenState Credit Union, bringing the lender's perspective and giving us a view of the summit through the eyes of someone thinking about how these technology actually works inside of, the lending organization. Nathan, great to have you.
Good to be here, and good to see you guys again so quickly after Act Tech Summit.
Yes, yes. So let's start broad. This was TMC's first time running anything like it, and honestly, the first time the industry has seen an event like this. The centerpiece was a live AI underwriting session. Five companies, including Candor, Friday Harbor, Oculus, Gateless, and Sonar, were given the exact same loan file for underwriting, and each of them walked through how their technology, handled the file. Right, it was not an easy file either. So, giving a lender a side by side look at the different solution, and then the parts that made them different in typical demo, that the room was lenders only, right? So Nathan, you were actually in the room. Walk us through it.
Yeah.
What was it like watching the live demo, the underwriting, and tackling the same file, and then getting to grill the presenters like an RFP style?
Yeah, no, it definitely was unlike any traditional vendor demo with the sense, like you said, it was live. It was a live file. Each of the vendors took the same file, and it definitely had some hair on it. That's for sure. It was not just a cookie cutter 20% down, amazing ratios. So, it had self-employed. It had some credit pieces. It had all of the nuances that when you're testing something, you really want to see how the vendor is going to perform with that. And it really did help share, highlight the differences between the platforms. Some were definitely more speed oriented. Others really had really great audit trails and explainability of how they got to that result. And then some were just, more holistically about the entire loan process itself from that standpoint. So, the pieces that the common thread for all of it is it's not about, I think a lot of people are worried about AI and this technology replacing teams, but it's really about elevating them more to exception based processes, really digging into the pieces that they really need a human in the loop from that standpoint. That's one of the things that everyone was talking about in the room is the human in the loop is it doesn't take that piece out. You need to make sure that information is there, checking it, going back to the source material from that standpoint. But it's really elevating our teams to do more and look more critically at the pieces that they need to, and let the other pieces continue to move on efficiently in our process. And again, really help reduce the origination costs. Like that was a big talking point at this conference was the cost to originate just continues to increase. And so where do we get some of those efficiencies? And then, like you said, is that RFP questioning, we really allowed us to challenge the vendors on the governance piece. So again, how is that decision being surfaced, going back to source documents, whether it's agency guidelines or calculations showing that rep and warrant. We really were able to grill into that and get, how do they validate those outcomes that they're putting and pushing back into our LOSs from that standpoint. And again, the thing I think that all of us took away was we really started focusing on transparency. Like, where is that information coming from? So you could easily see it as you compared each. Hovering over a document, it would show you where that number or that income calc came from, or back to, again, like the agency guides saying, hey, this is the source that Fannie puts out there. We're underwriting it to this, and this is where we conditioned for the file accordingly. And can I defend it to an auditor, to a regulator, and those that are looking at how we're using AI and automation in our processes.
I thought it was also interesting that, it like having five different underwriters looking at the same file. Sometimes the calculations vary also, right, on the income.
Exactly. That was really interesting as well, is that the majority, I will say, all had the same calcs within, maybe there was a small variance on that. I think the most was $140 variance on it, but being able to see that just like any file where an underwriter is looking at it was interesting. But again, the pieces it would surface is, our underwriters are a big cost in the origination space. And so saying, hey, here's the things that you need to go back and look at. Hey, there's some overtime, there's some bonus income, there's some other income that you may be able to use. We'll let you use your discretion. So again, that human in the loop saying, oh yeah, that makes sense. Let's check that box to add that into it to help with the ratios on this file. Or on, the credit report piece on that particular file, that there was a BK that, what type was it? Was it a 7 or an 11? That makes a difference. Had it been seasoned? So again, just it did act as a human in that sense, that the answers did vary, much like any file going through our process right now.
Yeah. So Tom, since it was lenders only, you weren't in the room, but as a title sponsor, you had a front row seat to everything around it. What did you hear afterwards from lenders and from presenting companies about like what the session was about and how it landed?
Yeah, I mean, I think Nathan really hit the nail on the head with a lot of points just around, some of the small variances I heard about in the income calculations from the AI underwrite. And I imagine, some of that bore out in the Q&A following the underwrite too, where you're taking into consideration what guidelines or factors may be incorporated into the logic behind the calculation of that income that could play a factor into some of those variances. I thought the other interesting feedback too is just the variance and overall turn time to complete that automated underwrite, maybe due to like the indexing of the file underwrite or going the extra step and providing the conditions tied to the conditional approval. So it was even just the feedback loop I got. I think it was very telling that, okay, five solutions aren't going to provide the exact same conditional approval review. A lot of it plays into how they're programmed in the first place, or maybe there's overlays with the lender's guidelines, investor guidelines that can all factor into some level of variance into what that underwrite looks like. Maybe just how you laid out too. You give a file to five underwriters, even under the same company, you're probably going to come back with some variance in the layer of conditions that come out of that approval. Um, I mean, outside of that, I think, the acts in general, I think there were some really clear winners in each act, which was cool to see. It was very intriguing to then see how the audience would feel about, between Automax and Lone Light and Mloop, who was the overall winner for it. But just for the audience not being there, I mean, Automax, that was really cool with their instant matching with appraisers and their co-pilot to enhance the appraisal report. Lone Light's AI agents embedded in being able to validate files and flag documentation issues was really sharp. And I think, Mloop's presentation killed it, and a really interesting concept that I'm surprised isn't already out there in the mortgage space, but a private portal for particularly originator recruitment out there, which can be so competitive and at times combative too between recruiters, the lender themselves, and the LO. So some really cool concepts involving emerging tech that came out of the Axe.
Yeah. But that wasn't the only competition or competitive moment at the summit, right? And there was also like separate pitch competition where 15 different companies competed for the Housing Wire media package, which tells you just how much energy and how much, companies showed up waiting to be a part of this event. So, Tom, Xactus sits at the verification and data level.
Yeah.
Credit, income, employment, fraud signals with 5 different underwriting platforms, live underwriting that's exact same file. Where does that put a data provider like Xactus in the stack? The pressure's on.
Well, I would say no new pressure here at Xactus. We'd certainly put a lot of pressure on ourselves through leadership and through product development teams, based on what we're hearing and seeing in the field. And I think it's a really relevant talking point too. Rob Crispin had a good write-up this morning, I think from some feedback from Brian View, who was at the summit. Um, that brought out a really compelling point. We focus so much on how the AI will say underwrite a file or process this and that. But what we're probably not focusing enough on is the quality of data that the AI is ingesting and then boiling out decisions from that. It's no different than any way a loan has been originated in the past, where if it's poor documentation and poor data quality coming in, the result's going to be equally as poor out there. So I think it will put a lot of pressure on the industry, providers like Xactus, lenders, originators alike, to ensure that there's high quality data being ingested on the front end, so that the automation and AI can, really prove out its potential to the fullest. Um, I think you can have the greatest AI underwriting solution ever created, but again, if you're having bad data coming in, like Nathan talked about earlier, you're likely still going to need a human in the loop on the back end as well. Um, you know, I think from our perspective, where we're going here is just starting to scratch the surface and incorporating some different AI components into new solutions we roll out. So, one in particular we talked a little bit about at the summit is Income Calculation X, which is a self-employed income calculation tool we actually just acquired from Baleen Solutions earlier this year, really designed to ease the process, whether you're an originator, a processor, an underwriter, in ingesting, various business income or rental property, non-traditional income forms, and being able to have the platform spit out quick income calculations that come with Fannie Mae rec warrants, but also flag maybe missing components in there or additional data that might be needed to complete an accurate income calculation. So it's exciting at our end, and that's our focus too, is just trying to provide as clean data as early in the process as possible, because it enables automation and underwriting tools, but it also empowers the originating lender um, to make high quality decisions and potentially reduce costs in wasted verification spend on that same data. Maybe they get later in the process and find somebody who doesn't qualify, or the loan falls out in process, and that's money that they end up having to eat that gets passed on to, their cost or the borrowers that actually do close.
Yeah, and that's definitely important to all the lenders. Everybody's looking for ways to be more efficient, right? And cost
Absolutely.
cutting. So Nathan, from the credit union side, where does
Yeah.
verification data actually create friction for your team today? And did anything at the summit, point that to getting better soon?
Yeah, so the 15 pitches that we went through and saw, I'm just going to call it, for those that were not in the room, it was like speed dating on steroids. So it was really an opportunity for us as lenders to really get a sense of what's up and coming out there in the space of whether it's on the sales side. So there was some interesting tech there with Vertex surfacing leads. I want to say it was like Uplift, possibly was another one, Uplist,
Uplist,
uh,
yeah.
Uplist. So again, just some on the front end to recapture those members because again, once a loan closes, it's out of sight, out of mind. The our borrowers don't necessarily remember who they got their loan through. So bringing that data in and making it actionable for the sales side was really, really interesting. But then on the back end, the data for the origination process, verification does remain one of the biggest pieces of friction in the process for both members and clients going through the getting a loan, as well as our operational teams. And so there's always the possibility for delays and manual intervention that's needed. And so the interesting thing is seeing how that the data is going to be more connected. And so instead of it being siloed, really getting it brought front and center for you from that standpoint. So, like LoanLight and Greenline, like Tom mentioned, using some of that direct source data to help you get investor calcs and specific guidance around, especially in the non-QM space. That was a really hot topic that those bank statement programs really and truly having that calc, the source data, you can see it, having something that's reliable for the underwriting team to go off of was really, really intriguing from that standpoint. And again, all of these vendors really brought different perspectives and angles that really, we could say, okay, I can see where that plugs into our process. And also then challenged us to rethink our process. I mean, there is a lot of that going on as we see technology, we see AI and automation coming in, reducing the number of touch points that someone has to stop, review, manually interact, and hand it off. There's a lot of potential to make our processes better and more consumer friendly from that standpoint. So all of these technologies that were demoed, from the AI underwriting to the speed dating of each tech vendor, really pointed at the industry. We're moving towards much more connected and intelligent workflows. I mean, that's the theme that I put down in my notes as a takeaway is we really need to look at our workflows and how do we build this in and reinvent the process, build a better mousetrap as we're implementing these into our day to day.
No, you're spot on, Nathan, because if we don't adjust processes to fully leverage the potential of these emerging solutions and automation, we ended up bastardizing the process, uh, which I'm sure many on this call have been part of that at their institution or a prior lender in their lives too, where we want to stick with our process because we don't like change and we don't leverage the technology to its fullest.
Yeah,
So
nail on the head
Tom,
there,
for
Tom.
So, Tom, for those who couldn't make it to Dallas, what are two or three big takeaway items from the AI underwriting session? And what should lenders be doing with that information right now?
Yeah, I mean, again, I wasn't in the room, so I may punt portion of that to Nathan, but I think the most evident next step, just from the feedback I received, was one, you want to look internally to ensure accuracy of the documentation, like I talked about, that your LOs, your LOAs, your processors are collecting from the borrower up front. Garbage in, garbage out. And two, like any platform, whether it's new or existing out there in the marketplace that you plan to adopt, test it, test it, test it. Do not buy based off a demo alone. You really got to get a test instance of a platform that you're doing your due diligence on, just so you can run files through it. You can test different scenarios. So at the end of the day, when you do sign on, you adopt the solution, you and your company can proceed with a confidence level and not be stressed out when you go live and all of a sudden there's, you found a way to break the solution pretty quickly that you didn't anticipate, and now it's downtime and triaging it with the partner behind the scenes, um, and it runs the risk of, you know, losing buy-in internally from your originators or your key stakeholders that are working within that platform on a daily basis.
One of the cool things that we do at TMC, and I think you guys would agree, both of you have lots of experience with us, is, whenever a lender is looking to, you know, change a system, for example, they would reach out to us and say, hey, I'm looking at this system. Do you have any lenders that are on the system today? Can I talk to them so that they can exchange best practices and talk about, what did you do and what did you wish you did, before you onboarded or before you bought the system or anything like that. So I think that's kind of cool that we're able to connect to lenders that way.
Yeah, I mean, you guys do that as a network in general, maybe between you and the team, but I'm sure a lot of that bears
Mhm.
out in the different working groups within the collaborative as well when talking about, collective vendor experiences.
Absolutely. Yeah. So Nathan, from
Yeah.
your perspective, what is Green State bringing back, based on this experience? Is there something specific you're changing or piloting as a result of the summit?
Yeah, so great question, Mimi, on that. And the first thing I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, again, TMC bringing some fantastic people together in the room. One of them, first thing on day two was Mismo, Brian View, and was in. And I think that's one of those things where the value add really came in from that standpoint, just talking about AI governance. And I think, all of us lenders had to, with Freddie at the beginning and then Fannie here as of August, what was it, August 6th, really our governance and controls around how we're using AI in our origination process was a really fascinating. I mean, it was 8 a.m. In the room. I needed more coffee, but it was one of the honestly. I made a note in my notes that it was one of the best sessions from that standpoint. Because again, Mismo, for those that don't, if you're not a participating lender with them, would highly encourage you to because they have a tremendous amount of tools as well that support our industry and create more standardization, especially where new things and new technologies coming in, they really try to standardize and make it more consistent for us in the back office space. So just putting a little plug in for them. But from that standpoint, the AI governance piece is one that bringing back and just again looking at it, we did comply with the mandates that were out there for Freddie and Fannie, but going back and just looking at the policies and procedures to make sure that again, as we're pulling AI into our processes, that like Tom said, we have those controls. We can go back and say, here's the result. Here's how we tested it. Here's how it, the decision making, the human in the loop piece, X, Y, and Z. So that as regulators and auditors and people come into that, we can go back and say, here's what we're doing. And it's defensible from that standpoint that we have that piece in there. So that was one of those pieces. Just again, continuing to build out more robust policies and procedures around that AI governance. Um, but it wasn't. It was also just not one specific vendor. It's again, like I said, is strategically thinking about our workflow design from that standpoint. Is as we're looking at bringing someone in. So we are in that RFP process for one of the five AI underwriting systems. Is again, how does it fit into our workflow, and how do we disrupt that, and maybe change our workflows in conjunction with that strong governance out there. So again, that's one of the pieces we're bringing back is again we're kind of rethinking it and getting ourselves set up that as we go into this we're thinking long term, and again like Tom said, test, that's the one thing we heard quite a bit of is really understand how it's coming up with those outputs from that standpoint as part of your decision making process. Is again, it don't get caught up in the shiny object from that standpoint. The one thing as well is everyone is focused on speed. So we all want to know how fast did it do something, but you also have to look at it that if it did take an hour to you know, file documents and rename and then do an underwrite and do XYZ, that's still an hour that, your team has time to do other tasks. Maybe they're not doing some of those, just paper pushing. It allows them to get on to the next file and then come back in and go, all right, now let's go through the high level, more high priority items on that file and not get lost in the minutia. So it's, I'd say our conversation hasn't changed as much, but it's shifted from should we to how do we responsibly bring in and operationalize AI into our process here at GreenState.
Right. Thank you, Nathan. So, Tom, zooming out, what's next for Xactus, and how do you see the role of verification data evolving as more of the industry adopts AI underwriting?
Yeah, it's a great question, maybe. And I would just add on to what Nathan was saying too. I thought the Mismo related session with Brian View and Amy Ezerandi and Aaron D was one of the best at the conference. It was a breath of fresh air to get some clarity on just some framework and guidelines that will protect
Yeah.
lenders out there. Because I imagine that's the biggest fear. And I mean, even on the third party side, we're scrambling too to make sure that we're creating solutions that are going to protect our clients from an AI governance perspective, and to know that Mismo is out there leading and building that framework for us all to, confidently comply with, brings a lot of confidence to the table with just the evolution of AI that we're just at the beginning of. Um, yeah, I mean, Xactus specific, I think for us, what we're really excited on the upcoming roadmap is what we call dynamic verification. So essentially, what we'll do is Today, we're getting indicator insights from each of our three automated databases with the Work Number, Experian, Verify, and Thomas and Company. And they're a great forward-looking data piece to know before, you know, a processor or operator pulls that verification of employment, if there's a record that exists within one of those databases, so that they don't have to pull back in inactive records that they pay for and can't use. They're getting pointed to the right solution out there, but it's manual today. And where we want to take it is leveraging AI and AI-based logic to direct the VOE order to the database most likely to have the employer record based on a historical record of what we have from these indicators today. And then if that record exists with more than one provider, be able to point the verification towards the cheapest of those options out there, and have AI and automation complete this whole task. So I click button for verification, that logic applies, points to the lowest price provider if there's multiples that are getting my record, and returns it back right away. And then from on the back end, so that our client can understand where that verification was pulled from, is a really clean summary report that comes with it. So if we had to use multiple providers to complete that verification, you'd see on the summary report, 16 months of coverage came from this provider. The other 8 months to complete the 2 years came from this provider here. So it gives a very transparent view for the lender, and we're pretty excited about the potential to roll that out early in 27.
We can't wait to see it. We can't wait to see it. So Nathan, closing thoughts for a peer at another credit union? Who wasn't in the room, for example, what would you tell them um, about why this mattered?
Yeah, not just credit unions. I think it's just any IMB, any bank, anyone that is in the lending space. It was a conference not just about AI and what it can do to make your teams more efficient and from that standpoint, but it was really about kind of what the future of mortgage origination, that process looks like. There was a lot of conversations in between the acts and in between the AI underwrite demos, just about what does this look like? How do you operationalize this? And so there was a lot of brain power in that room that you can glean tons of information from it. It really got my mind going, okay, what does this? Because technology is moving so quickly right now, and so many places would benefit that we don't want to adopt everything first. We want to kind of let some others try, but being in a room where people have, and you can kind of learn from them and say, okay, what was good, what was bad, have that collective think was so important.
You okay?
Sorry.
Apropos for the show,
Catching
Nathan
his
needs a
breath.
sip
Yeah.
of something.
Yes. Yeah. It took his breath away. It was so
Right.
impactful. So, well, this is a wrap. It's been a great conversation, and we truly appreciate the insights shared today. A huge thank you to Xactus for sponsoring this episode, and to Tom and Nathan for lending your expertise. Thank you. And of course, a special shout out to the listeners. Your engagement helps drive the industry forward. So thank you. Jody will be back to host in the host chair next week, Tuesday, August the 25th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. And if you are not a member but want to explore everything that has to do with TMC, we love to hear from you. Please feel free to reach out to our team. So cheers, and see you next time on the sit.
Cheers.
Thanks,
Thanks,
guys.
Jamie.
Thank you.
See you later.